Welcome to the Golf Improvement Podcast, episode 105.
Welcome to the podcast for golf lovers and enthusiasts who are looking to take their games to new heights. Dedicated to custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice to improve your golf game. This is the Golf Improvement Podcast with your host, Tony Wright.
Hello, this is Tony Wright from Game Improvement Golf in Oak Ridge, Tennessee with the Golf Improvement Podcast, dedicated to sharing useful information on custom club fitting, short game improvement, and effective practice techniques, bringing you the custom club fitting experience of your life and lower scores always. Well, it seems like there are a zillion podcasts out there that you can listen to. So first of all, thanks for listening to mine. But I had reason in the last week or so to just go back and think, why do I do these podcasts? And I think after 105 of them, I have a little bit better picture in my mind of why. And one of the reasons is I get excited when I get the opportunity to talk with somebody that is a little bit out of the box, that's somebody that maybe you won't hear from on some other podcast or in some other way, and someone that I can learn from and someone that can help me be better at what I do to help golfers play their best, and also someone where I can share what they tell and what they talk about with you to help you to play your best golf. So episode 105 is a great example of why I continue to do podcast interviews. I've admired the work of Richard Kempton, one of the true pioneers in MOI custom club fitting and club building for many years. And when I told my AGCP friends that he was going to talk with me, lots and lots of them were really excited. So when he agreed to do this interview, I was pretty excited, and in fact, I was almost worried that I was going to be too excited during the course of the interview, and it didn't disappoint, and hopefully won't disappoint those of you who are looking to improve your games. So enjoy, as I truly did, this interview with Richard Kempton from the Golf Doctors and Simply Golf in Kent, the United Kingdom. Hello, this is Tony Wright with the Golf Improvement Podcast, and this is an interview I've been really looking forward to doing, and it's with Richard Kempton from the Club Doctors in association with Simply Golf in Kent, the United Kingdom. Well, I did a little research on Richard, and actually Richard's one of the pioneers in applying MOI matching principles and building. But if you look back, he was the Golf Club Makers Association European Club Maker of the Year in 2001, 2002. He's adjusted and customized clubs for top amateurs, members of the European Tour, and Ryder Cup teams. But the one that resonates the most with me is from a good friend of mine, Tom Wishon, who said that you, Richard, are one of the top 5 best club fitters in the world and the best in all the United Kingdom. So that's good enough for me, Richard. So welcome today. And we're going to have a lot of fun talking about, one of the things that I'm interested in a lot, and that's MOI fitting and matching. So welcome today.
Thank you.
Well, talk a little bit about kind of your story. I guess you started into the world of club fitting somewhere around 1995, but say a little bit.
It was actually a bit earlier than that.
Okay.
Tom always gets it wrong. He always says it was about 1985, but he might seem that long to him, maybe because I've spent a long time pestering him with questions over the years. And I'll tell you a little anecdote about that later, which is quite amusing. But I come from a totally different background. I was an export manager for a company in the UK that makes housewares and particularly domestic scales, weighing scales. Left there and went into a company belonged to a friend of mine in the computer industry or IT industry on the hardware side, then got poached by one of our suppliers, and that didn't work out. So I left them in about 1991.
Okay.
And scratching around for things to do, suddenly thought, well, I like golf. It's an interesting game, so maybe I can get involved in that in some way. So I started looking around at options. I looked at the Nevada Bob's franchise in a nearby town.
Oh, how fascinating.
But then when I dug into the detail, the annual profit, oddly enough, was mostly made around Christmas time, not in the summer as I had thought. And if you didn't get a good Christmas, you didn't make any money. So I then looked at another option. There were, at the time, a lot of people doing golf club sales. They would hire a venue somewhere, a village hall or maybe a hotel or something, and sell pre-made golf clubs, cheap ones, to the general public. Well, that didn't look very exciting. So I started looking around a bit more and came across an article in a golf magazine. Bear in mind, this is pre-internet.
Oh, yeah.
So I came across an article that mentioned a research paper, which I managed to track down, done, I think, by a Japanese university or maybe a Japanese company, that suggested that off-the-shelf clubs fit less than 10% of golfers, and that in the USA only about 25% of clubs were custom fitted, and in the UK we lagged behind that. It was about 15%. So I thought, well, that sounds more promising because I like problems to solve, and that sort of fed that aspect of what I wanted to do. So I initially signed up with a custom fit franchise, which didn't work out that well. And then I found Golfsmith. So I went up there and had a chat with Bill and Jenny McGuinness, who ran the company over here.
Yeah.
They invited me up to the stand at NEC Golf Show, and they mentioned there was a guy called Tom Wishen coming over to give a talk on golf club technology. And they invited me to come up to that, even though I wasn't a customer of theirs at the time. And I listened to Tom speak for 2 hours without a note, and was so intrigued by what he said that I thought, well, this sounds a lot more promising. I sat at the front and asked a lot of questions. I learned afterwards that Tom wanted to know who the guy was at the front who kept asking all these awkward questions, and told Bill that if I had any more questions or had any interest in pursuing my quest for knowledge, that to just get in touch with him, which in those days would have been by fax, of course.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Or phone. I started corresponding with Tom by fax and then email, and at one stage I think we were probably exchanging, 30 or 40 emails a week.
Wow. Yeah.
And Tom was kind enough to answer any questions I had in a great deal of detail. So I'm very grateful to him for what I know, or think I know. And that culminated in me, I guess, getting the Club Maker of the Year Award for Europe from the Golf Club Makers Association in 2001.
Well, and Tom is the same way now too. He hasn't changed that way. If anybody asks him,
no.
Yeah.
No, he's very good like that, and he answers questions placed by anyone who wants to ask him questions on his own. In the forum they used to have on the Tom Wishen website, and they had a Clubmaker forum, as you're probably aware, and that's no longer available for some. I'd like to get it back if they can do it. But no, he's always been more than happy to answer anyone's questions if they showed an interest.
Yeah. Well, you were, that gets us into sort of the, the meat and potatoes of where we're trying to go today. And that is, you were one of the first custom fitters, I believe, to embrace MOI fitting and building. And so talk a little bit about how that came about and maybe some of your initial insights. I know that you did some initial testing over a 6-month period. And, for you, that was a little bit of an aha about, at least I think it was, about the value.
It was more of an eye-opener.
Yeah, right.
It just totally threw me. Tom told me about the concept of MOI matching that he and his engineer had come up with in about end of 2002, beginning of 2003. And eventually he rang me up and said, look, I've got a prototype matching system that Mondaire at Golf Mechanics had produced. And he said, I'm going to send you one with all the software and everything else, and I want you to do two things. One, I want you to evaluate MOI as an alternative to swing weighting, and evaluate the pendulum counter system you came up with as well. So I got the kit in about April, May 2003, and my first reaction was, okay, how do I start? So logically, the place to start was maybe do my own clubs.
Yeah.
So I did those because I've always had a particular problem, or had up to that point, had a particular problem with every set of clubs I've ever owned. I was great with the long irons, but could never hit the short irons. There was a particular hole on my golf course where if I was playing a foursomes match with my regular partner, what you call a Scotch foursomes, I think.
Yeah.
He is a dog leg, and he will always leave me short of the trees. So I could never see the green, or hardly ever. And it was about a 230-yard shot around the corner. I had to cut it about 25 yards. And it was about a one-iron, if you remember what one-irons were.
Oh, yeah.
And invariably, I'd dump it on the green, somewhere close to the pin. But if you put me 100 yards away or 140 yards away with a 9-iron or a wedge, I'd miss the green.
Probably left, I'm guessing, or or who knows, adjusting.
And
right?
the pro at my golf club, he couldn't work this out. He said, it's ridiculous. I've never known anyone that can hit a 1-iron or a 2-iron all day long, but he's terrible with a wedge or a 9-iron or any other short club in his hand.
Yeah.
So I got down to about a 10 handicap with a poor short game, not being able to chip, putting dreadful. A good round for me was 40 putts.
Boy.
So my long game was pretty good, but my short game was awful. So I thought, well, maybe this new system might help. So I did all my clubs and put them to one side. At the end of the day, picked them up one by one. I used to warm up with a 4-iron because I couldn't hit the 7-iron, which is what most people warm up with.
Yeah, right.
So picked up the 4-iron, hit it. Hit the 1-iron, hit it. Picked up the wedge, and my first impression was, good God, this thing feels like a ton weight. Because I'd added an awful lot of weight to the head to get it to match the MOI of the one, which is what I decided to do.
Yeah.
And as soon as I picked it up and hit it, I thought, well, hang on. I can hit this thing now. I couldn't hit it before. So I've hit every club in the bag and realised that they all now swung exactly like the 1-iron. And I could hit all of them solidly. So I progressed from there to working with a number of golfers over a period of 6 months or so, and found that they all preferred it to swing weighting, without exception. So I thought, well, this is obviously the way to go. I will not make swing weight match clubs anymore. I will do MOI matching only. And because I was still slightly worried about people rejecting it or coming back and complaining, I always made the same offer, that if they did not like the MOI match clubs that I had made, I would remake the clubs to any swing weight they wanted. Well, in the next 6 or 7 years, I only ever had one golfer want to do that.
And that's been my experience too, and exactly the same number of golfers in the, I guess, 6 or 7 years that I've done that there is one guy that said, I just don't like the feel of this. And why, I don't know, but there you go. That's just a...
Well, it could be. When I actually analysed this guy's clubs afterwards, I realised I hadn't matched them to the right number.
Ah, okay.
So it was actually my cock-up. Yeah. It wasn't. I don't think it was the fact he didn't like the MOI match. I hadn't set them to the right setting.
Yeah. Interesting. So the rest is history then. I mean, as you said, you've been
the rest
this.
is history, yeah.
So, and maybe just step back a little bit. I don't know if you saw the little book I wrote, but I mean, MOI matching is not, in the 1890s, they tried to do it, right? But they didn't know how to measure it. And it's really a physical property of a golf club as opposed to swing weight.
Yeah,
maybe you talk about your perspective of that a little bit.
Well, you say the MOI matching would have been, it was certainly possible back in the 1890s, but it would have required an awful lot of hand calculation.
Yeah.
It's only now that we have computers and software that can do all the number crunching for us very quickly that it's really become feasible for club makers to offer it as an option. It's pretty quick now. I mean, even the first pendulum counter system that Tom came up with required a lot of measurement. You had to measure the balance point of the club to within about a 1/16 of an inch or less. You had to get the weight of the club to within about 0.1 of a gram or less. And you had to find the balance point. I think I said that already. Some balance point, weight, balance point and weight, basically. Oh, and you put it in a device which swung the club between cutting a light beam, rather like a frequency meter with an infrared readout.
Yeah.
And that would give you the pendulum swing time, and you fed that into the software, and it calculated it. But to do a set of golf clubs that way took quite a bit of time. With the speed match, of course, it's a lot quicker. You can just put it on the scales, and you get a reading. Feed that into the software, and it tells you how much weight to add to each head. So it's all very simple.
In fact, I never really used the software, and I get a pretty good, after you do it for a while, you kind of get a reasonable sense of how much weight.
Yeah, you get a feel for it. And if someone comes in and just wants a quick adjustment with lead tape, I will do it that way. But if I'm building clubs from scratch, I know the length anyway, and I know the weight, and it's easy to do it. Just put the thing together dry with a split grip on it, put it on the scale, and it just speeds the process up. I know what weight pretty accurately to within half a gram that I've got to add to each head.
Yeah, Go ahead. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
No, it's fine.
Well,
it's just easier to use the software to get you in the ballpark, and then I add that amount of weight and put it back on the scales and check it, and I want all the readings within 5 units.
Yeah. And now I guess at one point early on, at least a couple of my friends used to do progressive swing weighting, which gets a little close. But I mean, if you had a swing weight, and if I have a set of swing weight matched clubs, I always measure that and see how the MOI varies. And the MOI might be 60, 70, 80 points lower on the wedges, right, throughout the set, whereas we're trying to build them 10-ish or less point difference, right?
I don't want more than 12 units, say plus or minus 6 over a set.
Yeah.
And I don't want any more than 3 or 4 or possibly 5 between any two adjacent clubs. Now, you mentioned swing weight. Now, the interesting thing is that I've seen recently, and if you see a set of these or start seeing a few sets, you might be interested to weigh them. Callaway are definitely moving towards an MOI match.
Yeah.
For their custom-fitted stuff, not for their off-the-rack stuff.
That's good news too, right? I mean, because we know it's the right way to go.
Match. What they do is they call it they use an ascending swing weight, but they only use 0.4 per half inch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which isn't enough.
Yeah.
It gets them close to an MOI match, but it's not close enough in my view. But they're moving in that direction.
And you said earlier, I mean, the real benefit is the overall. You can sort of groove your swing a little bit more throughout a set of clubs because
absolutely,
they all feel the same to swing. They're dynamically the same.
And of course it helps even with beginners if you can get them in the ballpark, because the clubs are more similar to swing. They don't have to change their swing timing from club to club. So it actually helps relative beginners improve or people who are taking lessons improve. I mean, the thing I notice myself, the difference between swing weight and MOI match clubs, is the ball striking consistently through the set of irons or between the drivers and the fairways. So you get a guy who comes in, he hits his long irons badly, but his short irons well, or his short irons badly and his long irons well, which is me, or he hits his mid irons well, but he's a bit off with his long and mid irons. And that's the difference between MOI matching and swing weight matching. Swing weight matching, that is what you see. You see the inconsistency through the set, and with MOI matching, you don't.
Yeah.
If you do it properly.
Yeah. And as I mentioned, to me, the other end is, if you're grooving, whatever your swing is, it's going to work so much better throughout that whole set. Kind of like you said, right? Yeah. The
tendency sometimes as well is to pull the short irons and push the long irons, or the other way around. Because the other thing I've noticed is, as with everything else about club making, the same thing doesn't have the same effect with all golfers. I mean, one of the first hard lessons I learned after I'd started in the business, I believed, as probably most people believe, that if you get a golfer with lies that are too flat, he's going to push his shots, and if they're too upright, he'll pull them. And then I get a pro who comes in, wants his lies adjusted, says he's pulling everything, and the lies are actually too flat.
Yeah.
So you think, hang on a second, what's going on here? He should be blocking these. And when I queried it, he said, well, yeah, the ball wants to go to the right. I can feel it wants to go to the right. So I'm trying to correct it by pulling it left, and I'm overdoing it.
Yeah. And then so you adjusted the weighting to get to help him get more to his optimal.
This was pre-MOI. I didn't know about MOI in those days. It was purely on the lie setting. He was going to play in the Open qualifying event in about 2 days' time, and he wanted his lies adjusted. So he's telling me he's pulling everything. So my uneducated or inexperienced brain was saying, well, that's obviously lies too flat, too upright rather. So he's saying, they're actually too flat. He knows they're too flat, but that's making him pull the clubs because he's compensating for the push that would otherwise occur.
Yeah,
and the same thing tends to happen sometimes with MOI. You increase the head weight for some golfers, which, if they do nothing about it, will tend to promote a bit of a push. But they sense it's pushing, so they use their hands to correct, and they overdo it and they pull it.
So it's really critical to find that exact MOI that just gets it, and some of the pictures that, you sent me and other people where you see that center contact, and it just is easy to get the ball to go fairly straight.
I've got pictures on my website of before and after, pre-MOI and post-MOI, and it's chalk and cheese. You get someone who hits it all over the face with his 5-iron or 6-iron, and you re-weight it or shorten it or adjust the MOI, and now he hits 6 shots and he'll come in the same place.
Yeah. That's what we're all hoping to do with our clubs, I'm sure.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the things that I'm looking forward to hearing you talking about is, I tend to, for example, if you look at drivers and fairway woods, I don't necessarily always build those to the same MOI but often I will build hybrids and irons and even wedges to the same MOI. What's been your experiences in those sort of two groupings of clubs in terms of what you typically see, or is there maybe no prescription there, right?
Well, it's odd. I have yet to make a set of golf clubs or find any golfer who actually hits or needs or plays best with the same MOI setting in his woods as in his irons.
That's for sure. Yeah, right.
There is a range, but it's so wide it's almost useless. I mean, I've seen people, the lowest I've seen is about a 50-unit MOI difference between the driver and the irons, but the most I've seen is about 250.
Yeah, I see somewhere in that range.
It's that wide.
Yeah. Now, how about between driver and fairway woods? Do you see 40-50 kind of gap, or just can't judge?
Yeah, you're sort of in the ballpark. Yeah, I mean, there are some people who like the same MOI in their fairway woods as in their driver. I'm one of those. So when I was playing, because I don't play anymore because it just gives me back issues, which I don't get if I don't play golf. So I stopped playing about 4 or 5 years ago. But my driver was 2,920 units, and my fairway woods were 2,920 units. But my irons are 2,820 units.
That's pretty hefty, by the way.
It is pretty hefty. Yeah, that's probably why I have back problems. Yeah. But I know it is because I've tried lighter clubs with the same MOI, and that sort of doesn't give me the issues. Yeah. But I sometimes treat... I sometimes split the setup into 4. So I'll have the driver on one MOI. The 3 and the 5 woods may be 30 to 40 units lighter.
Yeah.
And then the irons all in one setting, and probably the hybrid at the same setting. But if it's got a lightweight shaft, it might be slightly different. And the wedges, depending on how the player wields his wedges, I might be slightly different on those. The thing I do notice is that if I get a golfer who will hit pretty much only 3/4 shots with his wedges, he uses the Pelt's clock face system, for example.
Yeah.
And hits a lot of short swings. So maybe what Pelt's calls the 730 swing. If you build the wedges to the same MOI as the irons, then the tendency is to want to overuse the hands on the short swing if you keep the MOI the same as the irons. So I drop those by about 25 or 30 units, and that seems to be sufficient for most golfers who have a problem with the wedges at the same MOI as the irons.
So you might make the wedges a little lighter for those that are swinging.
A little bit, yeah.
A little bit, yeah. That's interesting.
I mean, that's about 2 grams of head weight.
Yeah, right. And it's very sensitive. 20 or 30 points is, as you said, 2 or 3 grams of head weight. So,
yeah.
Okay. Well, and I know there's a lot of people that have differing views of that, right? Some people think that building the wedge is a little heavier, but it may be a personal preference too about what their feel
I think
is.
With the wedges, it definitely is. But I don't think I've made. Well, I can't recollect having made any wedges that were actually higher in moment of inertia than the rest of the irons. They've either been the same or slightly lighter.
Okay.
But that's me.
And that makes sense from a how hard you swing them standpoint too, to me.
Yeah, the other thing, just moving a bit away from MOI, the other thing I tend to see, or I certainly prefer myself, is to use maybe slightly softer wedges, shafts in the wedges. Because if you're only hitting a 3/4 wedge, you're not hitting it as hard as the irons.
Yeah.
So logic dictates, why would you want them the same stiffness or stiffer? But again, it's a feel thing. Some people will say, no, I need stiffer shafts in my wedges. They don't feel right with a softer shaft. So it's a personal thing, and it's the same with MOI.
Yeah.
It's a personal choice. Each golfer is individual, and you have to treat them as such.
Yeah. But it's interesting that, if you do buy a set of, for example, taper tip iron shafts, almost all of the wedges are definitely stiffer shafts than in the 7, 8, 9. And that's a big area for improvement for a lot of golfers is what I think you said is, putting softer shafts in.
I think so. I never fit a shaft that I think is too stiff for the player, unless I never do. It tends to encourage hitting.
Yeah.
You feel you've got to hit them too hard, because if you don't, they don't feel right. They just feel dead.
Yeah. Instead of just kind of a smooth swing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and actually, the next to the last question, it's sort of a combo question, and you and I talked about this. So how often in your fitting efforts do you see real small changes in club head mass making a big difference in performance? And And maybe just some particular aha moments for you and for golfers related to, I've seen some of this thing on your website and other things that where you've talked about it, but I think it's interesting to share with golfers.
Yeah, on occasions, I've seen things that just blow me away. And the first aha moment was me. When I did my own clubs and realised that now I had a 9-iron that I could hit and I didn't have one before. But probably the biggest change I've seen, or the biggest aha moment, was a senior golfer whose his teaching pro, suggested he came to see me to get his irons reshafted, or possibly new golf clubs. He was a senior golfer, about 67 years old, still holding a handicap of 8, using, if I remember rightly, true temper release shafts, which are a lightweight steel, or were for those days, lightweight steel, so 105 gram, and fairly flexible. So after having looked at his swing, he was generous. I mean, I can see this like I'm still there, because it was so mind-blowing what I found that I've never forgotten it. He had a clubhead speed of about 63 miles an hour, and it was consistent. If he hit 5 shots, his clubhead speed didn't vary by more than 1 mile an hour. So it was 63, 63, 62, 63, 63. So he said, well, have you got any graphites I can try? So I happened to have 2 different iron heads with the same shaft in, both graphites, both a Wishon shaft, I forget which one it was, soft seniors flex. Not too far different in flex to the releases. So I picked the first one up and said, there we are, try that one. And the first hit with it was 69 miles an hour.
Wow.
It was 6 miles an hour up. And he repeated it 5 times. 69, 69, 68, 69. So I said, how's the club feel? He said, it feels great. I think the shaft might be a bit softer than mine. So, and I quite like that. Have you got a softer one? Well, it just so happened that the other club with the same shaft in it, I had under-trimmed.
Okay.
So it was playing a bit softer. So I gave him this club, and he picked it up and he hit it, and his clubhead speed dropped to 63. So I'm going, hang on, what's going on here? And he couldn't generate any more clubheads. I mean, he swung it 5 times, it was 63 miles an hour. So I thought, I don't know what's going on here. I said, does it, apart from the flex, does it feel any different? And he said, yeah, I think it might be a bit lighter. I said, what do you mean light? You've got it in the head. Oh, okay. So I put them both on the MOI machine, and the second club with which he could only generate the 63 miles an hour clubhead speed was about 17 units off.
From the first one, right?
Which is from the first one, which is about 1.5 grams of head weight. So I stuck about 1.5 grams of lead tape on it and gave it back to him, and his clubhead speed went to 69. So I moved him back and forth between the 3 clubs several times, and when he wasn't looking, I sneaked a bit of lead tape off the second graphite shafted iron. And when I did, his clubhead speed dropped back to 63. So that 1.5 grams of head weight gave him the ability to time the swing better and hit it with a higher clubhead speed. The rationale in my mind was, we have a steel shafted club which is okay for flex, but it's too heavy.
Yeah.
And the main reason he came to see me to have the graphite shaft discussion, because his pro said, well, looking at your numbers, your scores, you tire towards the end of the round. That's where your mistakes creep in. So I would suggest you try and find a lighter shaft that you can swing more comfortably for 18 holes. That's where we started. So the logic was, the lighter club gives him more clubhead speed, but it only gives him more clubhead speed if the MOI is also correct.
Yeah.
So I made him a set of golf clubs, which actually 6 years later he was still using, with those graphite shafts in at the softer flex, which he preferred, with the MOI correct.
That's a great story. I think I've had one experience where I've seen 1 or 2 grams just make a huge jump. And, that doesn't mean that everybody is that way. There are just some particular people where that's what fitting is about, right? That we're all unique.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that I've done a couple of times lately, and I have had one set of data in particular, which I can sort of share with you. I think I might have mentioned it when we had an email discussion.
Yeah.
But I had a golfer recently whose driver I reshafted. He needed he was a senior golfer, slow swinger, clubhead speed in the sort of high 70s, low 80s. And I put him into a lightweight 45 gram A-flex shaft, but I wasn't too certain that I got the MOI right. So I said, well, play with it for a week and come back and we'll have a little play around with the weighting. So when he came back, I got the TrackMan out and I put him on that, and I added, first of all, 2 grams of head weight and then another 2.5. And the numbers I'm about to tell you are the differences between no head weight and 4.5 grams head weight, which is actually quite a lot in MOI terms.
Yeah.
Well, his angle of attack went from 0.7 negative to 2.5 negative. His spin loft went from 12.9 to 19.8. His face angle went from 3.3 closed to 1.6 open. His launch angle went from 10 degrees to 14.6 degrees. His spin went from 2,464 to 3,200. Wow. His carry went from 149 to 167. His total distance went from 177 to 183 yards. His horizontal launch angle went from 3 degrees left to 1.1 right. The spin axis tilt went from 4.2 draw to 7 degrees fade. And the landing point of the ball went from 11 yards left to 10 yards right.
And you can't predict that. That's part of it, right? I mean, that's why every time you have to try to look at differences in weight and see what they might do.
But people think it just changes the ball position. It doesn't. It can change, in some cases, everything about that golf swing.
Yeah, that's a great story.
And another golfer, if I'd done the same weight additions, could have acted in the opposite direction. So instead of hitting the heavier club more to the right, he might have hit it more to the left.
Yeah.
And his swing, it's all up in the air. But it just shows how much difference. Apparently, if you say to a pro 2 swing weight points, most of them will say, well, that's not much. But 2 swing weight points is getting on for 40 MOI units.
Right.
And that is a lot. And if you only think in terms of swing weight, you don't see these things. And because golf pros and even a lot of club fitters, well, if you can call the people who work in retail stores club fitters, they don't play around with the weighting. They play around with different shafts, and they look at the numbers and they go, well, that shaft is, because of the flex, is producing this ball flight and the other shaft's producing that ball flight. But when you actually if you actually measured the clubs, you'd find that the specs weren't the same. The MOI is different.
Yeah, and probably by significant amounts.
Yeah.
Those are some great aha stories. I appreciate that.
The other thing, it's not strictly about MOI, but some people are very sensitive. They pick up very small numbers. I mean, you asked me about that as well. Another story, I had a scratch golfer came in, wanted his irons MOI'd, which I did, and as I was doing them towards the end of the session, I said, how are you playing? He said, I've just got a new driver. He said, it's great. It is fantastic. Best driver I've ever had. Oh, he said, I can even hit it off the deck. It's fantastic. Oh, okay. So what's the 3-wood like? Because I saw he changed that as well.
Yeah.
And he said, it's okay. I said, yeah, but it's not great. He said, no, it's not as good as the driver. So I checked the MOIs, and they were a lot different. So I thought he might be the sort of guy who wanted the same MOI in his 3-wood as he had in his driver. So I slapped some lead tape on it. Went back in the room, and he took one hit, and he went, crikey, that feels absolutely fantastic. Feels just like the driver. Okay. Hit a few more. Then he said, well, have you got a bathroom? So I said, yeah, it's through that door. So he went in there. While he was in there, I thought, well, I don't know if I actually got the MOI quite right. I'll put it back on the scales and see. I was about 7 units off.
Yeah.
So I put a tiny piece of lead tape at the back, rushed back into the fitting room, and propped the club back up against the wall. He came back out of the bathroom and said, do you mind if I hit a couple more shots? So I said, no, it's fine. He picked the club up, waggled it, and gave me a bit of a funny look. And then he hit it, and he said, have you changed this?
Oh, my.
So I said, no. So as you left it. He said, oh, I don't know, it feels different. So he hit a couple more, and he said, no. He said, this isn't the same club. He said, you've done something to it. What have you done? And I said, well, okay, I've put a piece of lead tape on it. He toned it over, and it was less than a 1/4 inch long, this piece of tape.
Yeah.
And I use quite dense tape, but even then. And he said, what, that piece of lead tape? I said, yes. He said, that's all you've done? And I said, yes. He said, blow me. He said, I'd never have thought I could have picked that up. And frankly, I didn't expect him to pick it up either.
Yeah.
Because it was such a small amount.
Wow.
But some people are capable of picking up that sort of weight, which is why you and I probably work to a similar tight tolerance. You know, people who say, well, it's okay, get it somewhere within 20 units. I don't think that's good enough.
Yeah, I try to be plus or minus 5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Plus, 10 unit variation is okay. 20 units isn't.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. Well, Richard, this has been really fascinating. I know the golfers that listen to this are going to enjoy it, and I promise you, my club fitting friends are really going to be excited to get to hear from you. Many of them are people that you've known from the past, and all of them had said hi and were excited that I was going to talk with you. So that's neat. Well, let's end here. And any final insights and guidance for golfers that you just want to share here at the end that. To reinforce things.
Yeah, I mean, apart from the obvious one is that they need to get their club's moment of inertia matched rather than swing weight matched. But from a club fitter's perspective, and you're probably aware of this, you can't look at somebody and just assume from their height, build, age, or whatever that they're going to need a heavy or a light MOI club. I've got an example here to give you. One of the guys I saw a couple of years ago, well, more like 7 or 8 years ago, was an ex-Ryder Cup player. He only played in it once. He was no one well known, but he was still playing on the tour. And his coach rang me up because he was struggling to hit fairways with his driver. So he's come in, and I've had a look at his swing and measured the driver, and it didn't seem overly high in MOI terms, until I picked up one of his irons. And then I thought, hang on, these feel very light. So I said to him, how do your irons feel? He said, the irons feel great. How's the driver feel? I thought, it just feels a bit heavy. It doesn't sort of release the same. So, fine, okay. So I worked out that if I lightened the club by shortening it, the driver, I could get it to a number that I thought was more in sync with his irons. Yeah. Which I did. I told him I'd taken 1/2 an inch off, but took 3/4. And he hit it great. His coach said his fairway percentage had gone up from sort of under 60% to about 75-80. So that worked. But I had another guy another customer of mine, who's in his 60s, skinny. He's about 5 foot 5'9", 5'10", probably weighs 10.5, 11 stone, which is about 147 pounds or something.
Yeah.
Not heavy, I mean, wiry. Now, you wouldn't expect a guy like that to need a heavy golf club, but he was struggling to hit his fairway woods. So I weighted those up until he was hitting them really solidly, and I had to put a lot of lead tape on. Now, when I measure, the comparison between those two clubs, you've got a Ryder Cup player who's quite strong, pro. His driver ended up at 2,820 units, which is pretty light for a driver.
Right.
This little skinny guy ended up at 2,950. Right, 130 units difference.
Yeah. Yeah.
And until recently, when he's now about 75, 78, we've had to lighten everything back. But as he was back then, I would never have even dreamed that his MOI with his best MOI with his fairway would be anything close to 2,900, let alone 2,950.
Wow. So you just can't make assumptions.
You can't.
And personally, you can't make assumptions that lighter is better and heavier is better and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
No, you can't. Yeah. No, you absolutely have to take each golfer on their merits.
Yeah.
You know that.
Yeah.
And any other decent club fitter knows that. But Joe Public, who plays golf, thinks if you're a big, strong boy, you need really heavy, really stiff clubs. And if you're a skinny guy or a lady, you need really lightweight, really flexible ones. And it doesn't work that way.
Yeah. Thank God we're unique, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it makes it fun, but that's part of what makes it fun for us. And then when the golfer finds the right combination for them, it makes it fun.
Yeah.
Well, Richard, this has been a delightful conversation today, and I'm going to put links in the show notes to to your website and any other things that you suggest I put there. So
it needs updating, so I apologise if everyone who logs onto it and finds it's out of date. But
they'll still enjoy it though. But but hang in a second, we're going to have that other little conversation that we talked about.
Hang on.
I really appreciate getting to talk with you and learn from you today. It's been great. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Well, Richard, thanks for taking the time to share some of your knowledge and some really interesting and great golf improvement stories with me and my listeners. So I want to step back just a little bit, and some of you know this information already, but maybe not all of you. MOI, or moment of inertia golf club matching, is something I've done for every golf club I've built in about the last 8 years or so. As I noted in my book, The Fit Is It, MOI is a measure of the dynamic feel of a golf club, and it's an actual physical property of a golf club. And swing weight is a measure of the static feel of a golf club. To me, there is absolutely no comparison in terms of the performance between the two. Golfers playing a set of properly MOI matched irons will definitely play better than if they're playing a set of swing weight matched irons, because all the clubs will feel the same to swing. And I have many testimonials from golfers that confirm this. So I'm glad that I had the chance to talk with one of the true pioneers of MOI matching, Richard Kempton, to let you share some of the things that he knows. I've put a link in the show notes so that you can find out more information about Richard, and also some specific links you may want to look at related to MOI club fitting and club building. Well, that's it for today, and the fun is going to continue. I just received my latest version of Rick Wright's Putter Laser Optics tool, and Rick's tool has come a long way since the initial version that I bought from him a few years ago. Rick is going to talk with me about the evolution of this amazing putting training tool in 2 weeks, and I think you're going to enjoy this one. Take care. See you in 2 weeks.
Game Improvement Golf, your source of information and inspiration to become an exceptional golfer now. www.gameimprovementgolf.com